I'm Maya Jones, and I'm a damn fool for trusting that bastard for 8 years. The rain hammered against our Jersey City apartment windows like bullets, matching the rhythm of my heart as I stared at Jack's phone. 3 years of messages. 3 years of working late and business trips to Boston. 3 years of Rebecca from accounting sending him photos I'll never unsee. Maya, you're home early. Jack stood in the doorway, his tie loose, shirt wrinkled. The same shirt I'd ironed for him that morning, thinking I was being a good wife. Who's Rebecca? His face went white. What? Rebecca from accounting. Nice little messages. Very detailed about what she wants to do to you. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside, October wind rattled the windows of this life we'd built together, 8 years crumbling in seconds. I can explain. Don't. I held up his phone. She's pregnant, Jack. Congratulations. He lunged for the phone, but I was already moving toward the door. Maya, please, let me... Let you what? Lie some more? That was Tuesday. By Friday, I was sitting in a sterile law office on Montgomery Street, signing papers that dissolved my marriage with the stroke of a pen. The lawyer's voice droned on about assets and alimony, but all I could think about was how the autumn air outside smelled like freedom mixed with fear. Mrs. Jones? Do you need a moment? It's Ms. Jones now. I signed the last page. And no, I don't need a moment. I need a new life. Walking out into the crisp October air, leaves crunching under my heels, I felt like I could finally breathe. 8 years of suffocation, of shrinking myself to fit into Jack's perfect suburban dream, was over. My new studio apartment in the Heights district was smaller than our old bedroom, but it was mine. The moving truck had delivered my loom that morning, along with boxes of yarn and half-finished projects Jack had always complained about. Takes up too much space, he'd said. When are you going to do something practical? Well, Jack, practical just walked out of your life. I assembled the loom in the corner where afternoon light streamed through the single window. My fingers traced the familiar wooden frame, remembering why I'd fallen in love with weaving in college. There was something honest about creating beauty from chaos, about taking individual threads and making them into something stronger together. The irony wasn't lost on me. As darkness fell over Jersey City, I sat at my loom for the first time in months, my hands moving in the ancient rhythm of warp and weft. Each thread I pulled tight felt like stitching myself back together, one fiber at a time. The carpet taking shape under my hands was deep burgundy and gold, colors Jack had always hated. Too bold, he'd said. Too much. Tonight, too much felt just right. 3 weeks into my new life, I was running out of money and patience. The divorce settlement wouldn't come through for months, and my savings were bleeding out faster than I'd expected. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and for me, that meant swallowing my pride and putting my work online. I'd always been old-fashioned about my craft. Jack used to mock me for refusing to modernize my business, but honestly, I'd never needed to before. His salary had been enough. Now, sitting in my tiny studio with bills piling up, modernizing looked a lot more appealing. The Interior Design Network Forum seemed like the right place to start. Professional, established, with actual designers who might appreciate hand-woven carpets instead of mass-produced garbage from overseas. I spent an hour crafting the perfect post, photographing my burgundy and gold piece from every angle. Hand-woven carpets with soul, I typed. Each piece tells a story. Damn, that sounded pretentious. I deleted it, tried again. Custom carpet weaving, traditional techniques, contemporary designs. Better, clean, professional. I hit post before I could second-guess myself again. The response was immediate and unexpected. Comments started trickling in within minutes, but one stood out from the generic nice work responses. Leah W. Design, incredible texture work in that burgundy piece. The way you've handled the color transition in the border shows real understanding of spatial harmony. Do you work with designers on custom pieces? I clicked on her profile. Leah White, interior designer, Jersey City. Her portfolio was stunning, full of clean lines and unexpected color combinations that showed real vision. More importantly, she was local. I crafted my response carefully. Thank you for the thoughtful comment. Yes, I do custom work. Your penthouse project caught my eye. Bold choices. Her reply came back within an hour. Bold is the only way worth living. Would love to discuss a potential collaboration. Coffee? And just like that, my inbox became the most interesting part of my day. Our conversations started professionally enough. She'd send me photos of spaces she was designing, asking about color combinations and texture possibilities. I'd respond with technical details about yarn weights and weaving patterns. But somewhere between discussing the psychology of color and debating the merits of natural versus synthetic fibers, our chats became personal. Divorced 3 weeks ago, I found myself typing late one Tuesday night. Starting over at 32 feels terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Terrifying and exhilarating is my permanent state, she replied. Keeps life interesting. What's your scary exhilarating? Besides running my own business, I have a thing for complicated women. I stared at that message for a full minute, my heart doing something irregular. Was she flirting? With me? I'd been out of the dating game so long I couldn't tell anymore. Complicated how? I typed back. Artists who pretend they're not artists. Women who weave their feelings into carpets and think nobody notices. That kind of complicated. This was definitely flirting. With me. A woman was flirting with me, and instead of feeling shocked or confused, I felt interested. When had that happened? Our daily exchanges became the highlight of my routine. She'd message me good morning, along with photos of interesting architecture she'd spotted on her commute. I'd send her close-ups of works in progress, yarn colors I was considering. She had this way of asking questions that made me think deeper about my own craft. What draws you to those particular color combinations? She asked about a blue and silver piece I was working on. They remind me of winter mornings, I replied. That moment when the sun hits frost and everything looks possible. You're a poet who works in fiber. You're a flatterer who works in compliments. Guilty as charged. But I mean it. Your work has emotional depth most people miss completely. These conversations stretched later into the evenings, migrating from design forums to private messages, from professional topics to increasingly personal revelations. She told me about starting her business at 25 with nothing but student loan debt and determination. I found myself sharing things I'd never told Jack, about dreams I'd buried under years of trying to be the perfect suburban wife. I used to want my own gallery, I admitted during one late-night exchange, featuring textile artists. Seemed impossible after I got married. What changed your mind about impossible things? Getting divorced, apparently. Good. The world needs more impossible things. By the end of November, we were chatting every day, sometimes for hours. She had this way of making me laugh even when discussing serious topics, of asking questions that made me see my own work differently. More than that, she made me see myself differently. We should meet, she suggested one Thursday evening. I have a penthouse project that could use your touch. Plus, I'm curious if you're as interesting in person as you are in pixels. My stomach fluttered reading that. Interesting is a dangerous word. I like dangerous. The butterflies in my stomach felt more like pterodactyls by the time I reached Grind Coffee on Newark Avenue. December had settled over Jersey City like a gray blanket, and I was questioning every choice I'd made in the last hour, starting with this ridiculous sweater that suddenly felt too tight. She was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups steaming on the table. Even from across the room, I could tell this was Leah. Blonde hair caught the weak winter light, and when she looked up from her phone, her blue eyes were exactly as striking as I'd imagined during all those late-night conversations. Maya? She stood, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. You're even more interesting in person. That's a relief. I was worried you'd be disappointed. Disappointed? She gestured to the chair across from her. I brought you a vanilla latte. Based on your personality, I figured you for a vanilla girl with hidden depths. I laughed despite my nerves. Hidden depths? We've been talking for 3 weeks. Exactly. 3 weeks of carefully crafted messages. This is where I find out if you're actually funny or just good at typing. The conversation flowed as easily in person as it had online. She told me about the penthouse project, a tech executive who wanted something bold but not overwhelming. I found myself sketching carpet designs on napkins, getting excited about the possibilities. You light up when you talk about your work, she observed, sipping her coffee. It's beautiful to watch. Heat crept up my neck. Sorry, I get carried away. Don't apologize. Passion is rare. Most people sleepwalk through their lives. Speaking from experience? Former sleepwalker, reformed 3 years ago. Her eyes held mine. Best decision I ever made. We talked for 2 hours. About everything and nothing. About her sister Claudia, who was studying abroad. About my failed marriage and her series of failed relationships. About Jersey City, and whether it was possible to reinvent yourself in the same place where you'd fallen apart. Walk with me? She suggested as the cafe began to empty. The waterfront was nearly deserted, December wind whipping off the Hudson River. Manhattan glittered across the water like scattered diamonds, all those people living their lives while mine was shifting beneath my feet. I have a confession, Leah said, stopping near the railing. My heart skipped. What kind of confession? I've been thinking about you since that first message. Not just professionally. The pterodactyls in my stomach took flight. Leah, I know this is complicated. You're just divorced, probably not ready for anything serious. But I'm not good at pretending I don't feel things. What do you feel? She moved closer, close enough that I caught her perfume over the river breeze. Something subtle and warm that made me want to lean in. That you're extraordinary, that Jack was an idiot, that I'd like to kiss you but I'm terrified you'll run. The honest vulnerability in her voice undid something inside me. I might run. But not right now? Not right now. When she kissed me, it was nothing like kissing Jack. Soft where he was demanding, patient where he was rushed. Her lips tasted like coffee and possibility, and when she pulled back, I was breathless. Still here, I managed. Still here. She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. That's a good sign. Is it? Maya, I've been out since college. I know what it's like to discover something about yourself that changes everything. I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to. The streetlights flickered on around us, casting golden pools on the empty walkway. In the distance, a ferry horn echoed across the water, carrying people home from their ordinary days. But standing there with Leah's hand warm in mine, nothing about my life felt ordinary anymore. I started, then stopped. I know. How do you know? The way you looked at me when I mentioned being attracted to women. Like you were seeing something new about yourself. She was right. Something inside me had recognized her from that first message, something I'd never acknowledged before. All those years with Jack, I'd assumed the restlessness was about marriage, about losing myself in someone else's dreams. Maybe it had been about denying who I really was. This is terrifying, I admitted. The best things usually are. She squeezed my hand. We don't have to figure everything out tonight. Good, because I'm pretty sure my brain stopped working the moment you kissed me. She laughed, the sound carrying across the water. Then my work here is done. Walking back to our cars, I felt like I was moving through a different world than the one I'd woken up in. Everything looked the same, but I was changed. One kiss had cracked something open inside me, something I hadn't even known was closed. Dinner tomorrow? Leah asked as we reached my car. Is that a good idea? Probably not. Her grin was infectious. Are you free at 7? I spent the next morning pacing my small apartment like a caged animal, second-guessing every decision that had led me to this moment. 3 cups of coffee later, I was still no closer to understanding what the hell was happening to me. My phone buzzed with a text from Leah, having second thoughts. That's normal. How did you know? I typed back. Because I've been awake since 5 thinking about how to make tonight less terrifying for you. The thoughtfulness in that message made my chest tight. When had anyone ever considered my feelings so carefully? Jack certainly never had. Dinner turned into a 2-hour conversation at a quiet Italian place in the village. Leah ordered wine. I stuck to water, needing to keep my wits about me. She told me about her first relationship with a woman in college, how confusing and exhilarating it had been. What about your family? I asked. My parents took it better than expected. Claudia was thrilled to have something to tease me about. Her expression softened. What about yours? Both gone. Car accident when I was 25. I pushed pasta around my plate. Sometimes I wonder if that's why I married Jack so young. Looking for stability. And now? Now I'm having dinner with a woman who kissed me last night, and I can't stop thinking about it. The admission hung between us like a confession. Leah reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Good thoughts or bad thoughts? Confusing thoughts. I keep replaying it, wondering what it means about me, about everything I thought I knew about myself. It means you're human. It means you're allowed to discover new things about yourself at 32. After dinner, she walked me to my car again. The December air was sharp, but I barely felt the cold. All my attention was focused on the woman beside me, on the way she kept glancing at me like she was memorizing my face. "Maya," she said as we reached my car. "Yeah? Can I kiss you again?" Instead of answering, I moved closer, my hands finding the front of her coat. This time, when our lips met, I was ready for it. Ready for the way she tasted, for the soft sound she made when I kissed her back, for the way my entire body seemed to wake up at her touch. When we broke apart, I was breathing hard. "Still terrifying?" she asked. "Less terrifying, more, everything else." She smiled. "Everything else is good." Over the next 2 weeks, everything else became the center of my universe. Leah showed up at my studio with coffee and pastries, staying to watch me work. Her presence was calming and electric at the same time, making me hyper-aware of every movement, every word. "You're beautiful when you're concentrating," she said one evening, perched on a stool while I worked on a commission. "You're distracting when you're watching." Good distracting or bad distracting? I set down my shuttle, turning to face her. "Come here." She slid off the stool, moving to stand beside my loom. This close, I could see the flecks of gray in her blue eyes, could count the freckles across her nose. "Good distracting," I whispered, before pulling her down for a kiss. This kiss was different from the others, deeper, more urgent. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I pressed closer, my body responding in ways I was still learning to understand. When her lips moved to my neck, I made a sound I'd never heard from myself before. "Maya." Her voice was rough against my ear. "Don't stop." But she pulled back, her breathing uneven. "We should slow down." "Why?" "Because you're new to this. Because I don't want to rush you into something you're not ready for." The consideration in her voice made me want to cry. When had anyone ever put my comfort first? What if I don't want to slow down? She cupped my face in her hands. "Then we don't. But I need you to be sure. I'm sure I want to find out what this is. I'm sure I've never felt anything like this before. I'm sure that scares the hell out of me, and I want to do it anyway." That's sure enough for me. When she kissed me again, I let myself fall into it completely. Her hands traced the line of my spine, my waist, mapping territory that suddenly felt entirely new. Every touch sent electricity through me, awakening nerve endings I hadn't known existed. "Your place, or mine?" she murmured against my lips. "Mine. It's closer." We barely made it through my front door before she was kissing me again, backing me against the wall. Her hands were everywhere, reverent and sure, and I was drowning in sensation. This was nothing like the mechanical intimacy I'd shared with Jack. This was discovery, exploration, worship. "Are you okay?" she asked, pulling back to study my face. "Better than okay. I'm awake." And I was. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I was completely, gloriously awake. 3 weeks into January, everything changed with a phone call. I was at Leah's apartment, sprawled across her couch while she made dinner. We'd fallen into this easy domesticity, spending most evenings together, learning each other's rhythms. She hummed while she cooked, always off-key, and I'd started to find it endearing instead of annoying. "Leah White Design," she answered her phone professionally, then her face crumpled. "Claudia? Slow down, I can't understand you." I sat up, watching her pace to the window. Whatever her sister was saying made Leah's knuckles go white where she gripped the phone. "What kind of genetic condition?" Leah's voice cracked. "How long have you known?" The conversation stretched on, Leah asking medical questions I couldn't follow, her voice getting smaller with each answer. When she finally hung up, she stood frozen by the window, staring out at the Jersey City skyline. "Leah?" "Claudia's sick." She turned, and I saw tears she was fighting to hold back. Some rare genetic thing. The doctors in London caught it early, but the treatment... "What about treatment?" "Experimental, not covered by insurance. They're talking about $300,000, maybe more." The number hit like a physical blow. I went to her, pulling her into my arms as she finally broke down. Her body shook against mine, and I held her tighter, wishing I could absorb her pain. "We'll figure something out," I whispered into her hair. "How?" "I've got maybe $20,000 in savings. My parents are tapped out from Dad's retirement. The business is doing well, but not well enough for this." Over the next week, I watched Leah transform from the confident woman I'd fallen for into someone desperate and fraying at the edges. She spent hours on the phone with doctors, insurance companies, anyone who might help. She applied for medical loans, started a crowdfunding page, reached out to every wealthy client she'd ever worked with. Nothing came close to covering the costs. "There has to be something," she said one night, surrounded by medical bills and loan rejection letters in her living room. "I can't lose her, Maya. She's all the family I have left." "You won't lose her." "How can you know that?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was hold her while she cried herself to sleep, feeling helpless in the face of something money could fix but we didn't have. Then David Moore walked into her life. I was at her office when he arrived, a man in his 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent. Everything about him screamed wealth, from his perfect haircut to the Rolex on his wrist. "Miss White, I'm David Moore. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance who recommended your services." Something about his smile made my skin crawl, but Leah was already switching into professional mode, desperate for any potential income. "Of course, Mr. Moore. How can I help you?" "I'm developing several high-end properties in Manhattan. Penthouses, luxury condos, the timeline is aggressive, and I need someone who can deliver exceptional work quickly." He outlined a project that sounded too good to be true. 6 properties, unlimited budget, completion bonuses that would put serious money in Leah's account within months. "The compensation seems generous," Leah said carefully. "Good work deserves good pay. I believe in investing in the right people." His eyes flicked to me, then back to her. "I understand you have some pressing financial needs. Family medical issues?" Leah's jaw tightened. "How did you know that?" "Word travels in our industry. I'm prepared to advance you $50,000 against future invoices. Consider it a sign of good faith." $50,000. I watched Leah's face, saw her calculate how much that would help with Claudia's treatment. It wouldn't cover everything, but it was a start. "What's the catch?" I asked. David's smile never wavered. "No catch. Just excellent work on an ambitious timeline." After he left, Leah was quiet for a long time, staring at the contract he'd left behind. "It's a lot of money," she said finally. "It's suspiciously a lot of money. Maya, this could save Claudia's life. Or it could be something else entirely." She looked at me with exhausted eyes. "What choice do I have?" I wanted to argue, to tell her we'd find another way, but watching her sister suffer while having the means to help right in front of her, I understood the desperation driving her decision. "Just be careful," I said. "If something feels wrong, I'll be careful." She kissed me softly. "Thank you for understanding." But as I watched her sign David Moore's contract, a cold knot formed in my stomach. In my experience, when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. And I had the sinking feeling we were about to find out exactly how true that was. Within a week of signing David's contract, Leah's life transformed completely. The $50,000 advance appeared in her account, exactly as promised, and she immediately wired half to the London clinic for Claudia's initial treatment costs. "It's working," she told me over dinner, her face lighter than I'd seen it in weeks. "Claudia starts the experimental therapy next month." "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. But something about David Moore still nagged at me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. The work itself seemed legitimate enough. Leah showed me photos of the Manhattan penthouse she was designing, all clean lines and expensive materials. The client meetings happened in glass-walled conference rooms in Midtown, everything professional and above board. But then she started coming home with more money than made sense. "Completion bonus," she explained when I noticed the designer bags, the expensive wine, the envelope of cash she casually tossed on her kitchen counter. "David believes in rewarding excellence." How much excellence are we talking about? Enough to cover Claudia's treatment completely? Maybe enough to expand the business? That night, she pulled me close in her bed, her hands hungry and desperate. Our lovemaking had evolved over the weeks, becoming more intense, more knowing. I'd learned the places that made her gasp, the pressure she liked, the words that undid her completely. "I love you," she whispered against my throat, as we moved together, her body arching beneath mine. "I love you too," I replied, the words coming easier each time I said them. She rolled us over, pinning my wrists gently to the mattress, her blue eyes dark with desire. When she moved down my body, taking her time, I lost myself in the sensation of her mouth, her patience, the way she seemed to worship every inch of my skin. The pleasure built slowly, overwhelmingly, until I was calling her name into the darkness. Later, tangled in her sheets with moonlight streaming through the windows, I traced patterns on her bare shoulder and tried to ignore the growing unease in my gut. Maya? Her voice was soft, drowsy. Yeah? Thank you for not running when this got complicated. Where would I run to? Anywhere. Back to your old life, maybe. I kissed the top of her head. My old life doesn't exist anymore. This is my life now. But as February wore on, the complications multiplied. David's projects grew more frequent, more lucrative, and more secretive. Leah started having meetings she couldn't discuss, accepting payments in cash she immediately deposited in multiple accounts. Money laundering diversification, she explained when I asked about the different banks. David's accountant recommended spreading things out for tax purposes. Since when do interior designers need money laundering advice? Since we're dealing with this kind of money. She showed me her laptop screen, and I nearly choked on my coffee. Her business account showed deposits that would have taken her years to earn through legitimate design work. Leah, this is insane. Nobody pays designers this kind of money. David's clients are insanely wealthy. Oil money, tech money, old family money. They don't think about costs the way normal people do. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that Claudia's recovery was built on legitimate foundation. But the numbers didn't add up, and neither did the secrecy surrounding David's projects. The truth started unraveling on a Tuesday morning when I found Leah crying over her laptop in her kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes. What happened? David wants me to do something I'm not comfortable with. What kind of something? She closed the laptop, rubbing her face. He wants me to create invoices for work that doesn't exist, design fees for properties that haven't been developed yet. Says it's normal in high-end development, getting paid for conceptual work. That's not normal, Leah. That's fraud. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. But Claudia's treatment is working. The doctors in London are optimistic for the first time since this started. If I stop now, if you don't stop now, you could end up in prison. And if I do stop, my sister could die. The brutal choice hung between us like a blade. I understood now why she'd been so desperate, why she'd ignored every red flag. When someone you love is dying, morality becomes a luxury you can't afford. There has to be another way, I said. Like what? You want to contribute $50,000 to Claudia's medical bills? Because that's what I need to keep her treatment going. The anger in her voice was sharp enough to cut, but underneath it was pure terror. She was drowning, and David Moore had thrown her a rope made of quicksand. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I didn't mean that. Yes, you did. And you're right. I can't help with the money. Maya, please. I'm not thinking straight. This whole situation is killing me. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her shake against me. We'll figure something out. There has to be a way that doesn't involve you going to prison. But even as I said it, I could see the hooks David had set. The advance money already spent on Claudia's treatment. The ongoing medical costs that required continuous payments. The web of false invoices already submitted and approved. Leah was trapped, and both of us knew it. The first sign of real trouble came on a Thursday afternoon when I was alone in my studio, working on a commission for one of Leah's legitimate clients. The knock on my door was sharp, authoritative, nothing like the gentle raps from neighbors or delivery drivers. Two men in dark suits stood in my hallway, badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Miss Jones? Agent Martinez, FBI. This is Agent Chen. We'd like to ask you a few questions about Leah White. My blood turned to ice water. What about her? May we come in? I stepped aside, my hands trembling as I gestured toward the small seating area near my loom. They looked around my studio with professional interest, noting everything, cataloging details I couldn't begin to understand. How long have you known Ms. White? Agent Martinez asked, settling into my only decent chair. Since November. We met through a design forum. Are you romantically involved? Heat flooded my cheeks. Is that relevant? Everything is relevant in a federal investigation, Miss Jones. Federal investigation. The words echoed in my head like gunshots. What kind of investigation? Money laundering, wire fraud, tax evasion. Agent Chen consulted his notes. Miss White has been accepting payments for services never rendered, creating false documentation, and moving large sums of money through multiple accounts. That's impossible. Leah's honest. She's helping her sister pay for medical treatment. We know about Claudia White's condition. We also know about the $300,000 that's moved through your girlfriend's accounts in the last 6 weeks. $300,000. I felt dizzy. That's for her sister's treatment. Some of it, maybe. The rest is profit from a sophisticated money laundering operation run by David Moore and his associates. David Moore. The name I'd been dreading since that first meeting. Ms. Jones, we need your help. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Ms. White is in serious legal jeopardy. Multiple federal charges, potential prison time. But she's also a victim here, manipulated by people who prey on desperate situations. What do you want from me? Information. Access. Help us build a case against Moore and his operation while protecting Ms. White as much as possible. You want me to spy on her? We want you to help save her. After they left, I sat in my empty studio for 2 hours, staring at the half-finished carpet on my loom. The burgundy and gold threads that had once seemed beautiful now looked like a tangled mess. Patterns that made no sense. Colors that clashed instead of harmonized. When Leah knocked on my door that evening, I almost didn't answer. Maya? Your car's here, but the lights are off. I opened the door to find her holding takeout bags and wine, her smile bright with anticipation. She looked so normal, so innocent, that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the whole federal agent conversation. Surprise dinner, she said, kissing my cheek as she walked past. Thai food from that place you love? Leah, we need to talk. Something in my voice made her freeze. What happened? The FBI came to see me today. The takeout bags slipped from her hands, containers scattering across my floor. What did they want? They know about David Moore. They know about the money. She sank into my couch, her face going ashen. What did you tell them? Nothing. But they know, Leah. They know everything. Damn it. She buried her face in her hands. I knew this would happen. I knew it was too good to be true. Why didn't you stop? Because Claudia is getting better. The words exploded out of her. For the first time in months, she's responding to treatment. The doctors are talking about remission, Maya. How could I stop? I sat beside her, taking her shaking hands in mine. Because now, you could go to prison. I know. Tears started falling. I know, and I hate myself for it. But I couldn't let her die. I couldn't be the reason my sister died because I was too moral to break a few laws. A few laws? Leah, they're talking about money laundering and wire fraud. Federal charges. What do they want from you? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. They want me to help them build a case against Moore. By spying on me. By helping you, they said. She laughed bitterly. Right. Help me straight into a federal prison. What if it's the only way to get you out of this? There is no out of this, Maya. Don't you understand? I'm in too deep. The money for Claudia's treatment came from Moore's operation. Even if I cooperate, even if I testify against him, I'm still guilty of fraud. We sat in silence, surrounded by spilled pad thai and the wreckage of our carefully constructed new life. Everything I'd started to believe in, everything we'd built together, was crumbling around us. I have to keep meeting with Moore, she said finally. If I stop now, he'll know something's wrong. The agents could be watching him, waiting for evidence. Leah, you can't keep laundering money. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. She turned to me, her blue eyes fierce. Easy for you to say, it's not your sister dying in a London hospital. The words hit like a slap. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's my reality. I watched her gather the scattered takeout containers, her movements sharp and angry. This wasn't the gentle woman who'd taught me about loving another woman, who'd kissed me by the waterfront and made me feel alive for the first time in years. Maya, she said from my kitchen, I need to know you're with me on this. What does that mean? It means I need to know you won't run the first time things get really difficult. Things are already really difficult. They're about to get worse. She was right. Whatever came next, whatever choices we had to make, they would test everything we'd built together. But looking at her silhouetted in my kitchen doorway, I realized running wasn't an option anymore. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "Even if this destroys everything?" "Even if it destroys everything." The next morning, I made the call that would change everything. "Agent Martinez, this is Maya Jones. I want to help." Within an hour, I was sitting in a sterile FBI office in Newark, signing papers that made me an official cooperating witness. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was betraying the woman I loved to save her. "We need evidence of Moore's operation," Agent Martinez explained. "Financial records, communication logs, anything that proves the conspiracy." "How am I supposed to get that? I'm not part of their meetings." "But you have access to Miss White. Her computer, her files, her communications with Moore. You want me to steal from her. We want you to document criminal activity." The distinction felt meaningless when I thought about searching through Leah's personal belongings, looking for evidence to use against her. What happens to her when this is over? That depends on her cooperation. If she helps us take down Moore's organization, the prosecutor might consider reduced charges. Might. The word offered no comfort, no guarantee that this betrayal would actually save her. That evening, Leah was unusually affectionate, as if she sensed something shifting between us. She cooked dinner, opened expensive wine, talked about plans for after Claudia recovered. "I'm thinking about expanding the business," she said, curled against me on her couch. "Maybe opening a showroom in Manhattan." "With what money?" "Clean money. After this Moore situation resolves, I'll have enough capital to grow legitimately." I wanted to scream. Instead, I played with her hair and made non-committal sounds while she outlined a future built on criminal foundations. "Maya? You're quiet tonight." "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how much I love you." It was completely true and completely devastating. She turned in my arms, studying my face with those blue eyes that had first captivated me. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." When she kissed me, I tasted desperation alongside the wine. Her hands moved over my body with urgent need, as if she was trying to memorize every touch. We made love that night with an intensity that felt like goodbye, though neither of us said it. Later, while she slept, I sat by her bedroom window staring out at the Jersey City skyline. Tomorrow, I would start gathering evidence against her. Tomorrow, I would become the worst kind of lover, the one who destroys what she claims to protect. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Leah had to meet with Moore's accountant, some last-minute crisis about invoice discrepancies. She asked me to water her plants and pick up her mail. "I'll be back by 6, she said, kissing me goodbye. "We can order pizza and watch something mindless." Sounds perfect. But after she left, I sat in her living room for 20 minutes, staring at her laptop. Opening it felt like crossing a line I could never uncross, but thinking about her in federal prison felt worse. Her email was a roadmap of criminal activity. Messages from Moore outlining fake projects, invoices for properties that existed only on paper, wire transfer confirmations for ridiculous amounts of money. Everything the FBI needed to prove conspiracy. I photographed what I could, my hands shaking as I documented Leah's descent into criminality. The saddest part was seeing her own reluctance in the messages, her attempts to limit the fraud, to maintain some boundaries even while crossing every line. "This makes me uncomfortable," she'd written to Moore about a particularly elaborate scheme. His response was chilling. "Comfort is a luxury you can't afford while your sister is dying." By the time I heard her key in the lock, I'd sent everything to Agent Martinez and returned her laptop to its original position. She walked in carrying Chinese takeout, her face strained from whatever meeting she'd endured. "How did it go?" I asked. "Moore wants me to create invoices for 2 more fake properties. Big ones. 6-figure payouts. Are you going to do it? Do I have a choice?" She sat beside me, leaning into my shoulder with exhaustion. "Maya, I want you to know that whatever happens, these months with you have been the best of my life." "Don't talk like that." "Like what?" "Like we're ending. Aren't we? I mean, realistically, how does this story end well?" I turned to face her fully, taking her hands in mine. "It ends with us together. It ends with Claudia healthy and you free from Moore's hold. It ends with us building something real." "You really believe that?" "I have to." She kissed me then, soft and sweet, and I kissed her back knowing it might be one of our last moments before everything exploded. The evidence I'd gathered would bring down Moore's operation, but it would also destroy the woman in my arms. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered against my lips. Always. We spent that night holding each other, making love with desperate tenderness, as if we could stop time by refusing to acknowledge tomorrow. Her body against mine felt like home and heartbreak simultaneously. "Whatever happens," she murmured as dawn broke over Jersey City, "I want you to know that you saved me." From what? From being alone in this. From facing the worst thing in my life without someone who loves me. But I wasn't saving her. I was destroying her, one photographed email at a time, and the knowledge was killing me slowly, one kiss at a time. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. I know because I was watching from my studio window when the FBI descended on Leah's office building like a swarm of dark-suited locusts. My phone rang 30 seconds later. "They're here." Leah's voice was barely a whisper. "Maya, they're arresting me." "Don't say anything. Wait for a lawyer." "I know." A pause. "I love you." The line went dead. I spent the next 18 hours in FBI offices, giving statements, reviewing evidence, watching my photographs of Leah's emails being used to build the case against David Moore. Agent Martinez treated me like a hero, praising my cooperation, promising that my testimony would help protect Leah from the worst charges. But when I saw her at the federal courthouse the next morning, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit, I felt like the lowest form of life on earth. "Your girlfriend's smart," Agent Chen told me as we watched her plea hearing. "She's cooperating fully. Moore's organization is finished." Leah pled guilty to money laundering and wire fraud, accepting a deal that would put her in federal prison for 18 months in exchange for her testimony against Moore. Her lawyer had worked miracles, considering the evidence against her. The same evidence I'd provided. She looked at me once during the hearing, her blue eyes holding no anger, just sadness. She'd figured out how the FBI had gotten their information. She knew what I'd done, and somehow, she'd forgiven me before I'd even forgiven myself. Moore got 15 years. His entire operation crumbled under the weight of Leah's testimony and my photographs. Justice was served, criminals were punished, and the system worked exactly as it was supposed to. But I still felt like I'd failed at the only thing that mattered. 6 months later, I was sitting in the visiting room at Danbury Federal Correctional Institution, waiting for them to bring her out. I'd made this trip every week since her sentencing, driving 2 hours each way to spend 30 minutes with the woman whose life I'd helped destroy to save. "You look good," she said, settling into the plastic chair across from me. Prison had made her thinner, paler, but her eyes still held that warmth I'd fallen in love with. "So do you." "How's Claudia?" "In remission. Complete remission. The doctors in London are calling it a miracle." "That's wonderful." "Maya." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You saved her life. The money I laundered, the crimes I committed, they kept her alive long enough for the treatment to work. I'll never regret that. Even though it landed you here?" "Even though it landed me here." We talked about her work in the prison library, about my carpet commissions, about the changing seasons in Jersey City, normal things, as if we were just a couple catching up over coffee instead of separated by bulletproof glass and federal sentences. "I'm getting out in 6 months, she said as our time ended. "Good behavior. I'll be waiting." "Maya, you don't have to." "I'll be waiting." And I was. On a cold March morning, I stood outside Danbury Federal Correctional Institution at 6 a.m., watching the gates open and Leah White walk back into the world. She looked different, older somehow, but when she saw me, her smile was exactly the same. "You came. I told you I would." The drive back to Jersey City was quiet, both of us processing the strange reality of being together without crisis, without federal agents, without the weight of secrets between us. "What happens now?" she asked as we crossed into our familiar skyline. "Now we try again. Different this time." How different? No more lies, no more secrets, no more crime families or money laundering or anything that involves the FBI. She laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in over a year. Deal. I'd spent the last 18 months rebuilding my life, focusing on my carpet business, learning to live with the choices I'd made. The studio apartment had become home in a way Jack's house never had. My work was selling well, featured in galleries and designer showrooms. I was finally the artist I'd always wanted to be. But none of it had felt complete without her. "I found us a space," I told her, as we pulled up to a converted warehouse in the Heights district. Ground floor for your design studio, loft upstairs for living. If you want it. She stared at the building, then at me. You want to live together? After everything? I want to try. If you're willing to trust me again. Maya, you saved my life. Yeah, the methods were complicated, but you kept me from going down with Moore's whole organization. You chose the hardest path because it was the only one that led to both of us surviving. I betrayed you. You protected me. That afternoon we stood in the empty studio space, sunlight streaming through tall windows, planning our future. Her design business, my carpet weaving. A shared life built on honesty instead of desperation. Partners? She asked, extending her hand. Partners, I agreed, shaking it formally before pulling her close. When I kissed her, it felt like coming home after the longest journey of my life. We'd been through hell and back, lost each other and found each other again, learned that love sometimes requires impossible choices and devastating sacrifices. 6 months later, our combined business was thriving. Leah White Design and Maya Jones Textiles, partners in work and life. Her probation officer approved. Claudia visited from London completely healthy. And slowly, carefully, we were building something beautiful from the wreckage of our mistakes. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about those federal agents, about the choice I'd made to betray the woman I loved in order to save her. But watching Leah in our shared studio, designing spaces while I wove carpets that would fill them, I knew I'd choose the same path again. Love isn't just about holding on. Sometimes, it's about knowing when to let go, and trusting that if you're meant to be together, you'll find your way back. We found our way back.